Welcome to the Popcorn Talk Network, for the online broadcast network that features movie discussion, news, and interviews. Press 1. Popcorn Talk. We talk movies. From the Popcorn Talk Network and producers Maria Menounos, Kevin Undergaro, and Phil Svitek, this is iTalk Movies. Long-form interviews with leading members of the film industry. And now, your host of iTalk Movies.
Hello, this is Fern Ronay here. Welcome to iTalk Movies on the Popcorn Talk Network. I am joined today by Dominic Flores, who stars along Sandra Bullock in the new movie Our Brand is Crisis.
Hello,
welcome.
Thanks for having me,
How are you
Fern.
doing?
I'm doing great.
Thank you so much for being here. So, your wife had a dream 3 years ago that you were going to star in a movie with Sandra Bullock.
Oh my grace, yes.
If that doesn't give you chills.
Where am I talking? Right here? Right there?
Yes,
Anywhere?
right there.
Yes, my wife. Oh, right here even. Okay, yeah. My wife had a dream 3 years ago in 2012. You know, we're mystical people, so I was
Yes.
2012 was already kind of a cool year. But yeah, we...
Did she wake up and say, "You're not going to believe this"?
It was at the midnight hour. She goes to bed. We have 3 toddlers, so
Yeah.
she's actually we didn't have a toddler. We only had 2 at that point. Yeah, and it was about the midnight hour. She sleeps a couple hours earlier than I, as I watch the late night shows or whatever. And she came out and she was like, "You're gonna be in a movie with Sandra Bullock. It's no big deal. We're friends and it's good." And that was it. She went right back to bed. And in the morning, I said, so I'm going to be in a movie with Sandra Bullock, huh? And she's like, "Oh my gosh, yes, I had this dream. Yeah, you're in this movie with Sandra Bullock." And I'm like standing on the set and I'm standing next to her and it's like no big deal. Like, you know, and yeah, and at the time I think I maybe had an audition for a Burger King commercial that day, you know?
Right, yeah.
So that I'm like,
Yeah.
Sure, great, honey. I have no
Sounds
idea
good.
how it's going to go from there.
When this movie came about and you went to the audition and you found out, did you say, remember that dream you had?
It took a minute, yeah. Like nothing when the... I do tend to live kind of this weird cosmic life, so there were all these other synchronicities that had come up.
Oh, we're going to talk about that.
I know, right? And then I think it was kind of at the director's session for the audition process when I was realizing, I'm like, wait, she had a dream of this. Does this mean like anything? So I mean, it meant a lot, but yeah, no. But we had forgotten. We honestly had forgotten until later in the process.
And
of
then
the
that
audition.
moment, like, wow, dreams literally really do come true. So you play Hugo Barco, who's the campaign manager in Bolivia to struggling presidential candidate Senator Castillo.
Right.
And you. Okay, I saw the movie Tuesday night at an advanced screening, and you
great.
look completely different.
I do. I gained 40 pounds for the part.
You look fantastic.
Thank you. In the last year, I've lost 40. I think I've lost 45 pounds.
Nice.
I feel even more back to myself than before.
So what was that like when they said, you're going to have to...
You know, I'm no stranger to the fight. Like weight's always a thing. You know,
Right.
I'm kind of always been proud of my dad bod,
Okay.
But yeah, whenever you go into an audition, you're trying to look your best and you suck it in. And this was a part where I get to play a politician, so I had my suit snugged in.
Right.
But then at the end of the session with David Gordon Green, the director, he likes to do improv, so we had been in the room, I think, for like 30 to 45 minutes. Mm-hmm. And at the end, I had a feeling I'd done pretty well.
Yeah.
I don't know. And he did. He came up to me and said, "Hey, so would you be willing to get more out of shape for the part?" And he kind of had that very political correct kind of like, you know, this is kind of, I don't even know how to put this to him.
Right.
And yeah, so I just kind of let it all hang out, unbuttoned my jacket, and I said, "Oh my gosh, please let me gain weight." So yeah.
What do you do? Do you have to do it in a healthy way? Did they kind of prescribe you?
My sister's she's a school teacher, but really she's an amazing nutritionist. So she offered to help me to gain weight in a healthful manner. I took her up to some extent, but it was a lot of happy hour. I haven't had taquitos and 2-plate combos at Don Jose's in a while, but it was a lot of pitchers of beer.
Nice. And then did she help you on the back end?
She did. She helped me on the way back. We did the whole cut the sugar completely, 100%. Mm-hmm. Sugar tends to be a lot of this, so the sugar flies off.
Good stuff.
The alcohol, you know, I just am really stringent on the no sugar and everything else, so I can still have my glass of wine and stuff.
Yeah, you can't be completely deprived. So in the film, it's pretty clear that Senator Castillo's staff is a bit out of touch. And there's one scene in particular that it's abundantly clear, and I'm talking about the bus scene, not the bus scene, which we will also talk about, but the bus scene where there's bricks being thrown at the bus and it comes to a halt, and your character says, "These people," do you remember the line exactly? And then Sandra Bullock comes back at you.
With these people. I'm really glad you caught that. And it was when I read the script, that was one of the most significant moments I felt like in the movie. And I was so glad that I was getting to talk. That I was the one going to talk about this part. Because there's two things. Him and Senator Castillo, Hugo, and Senator Castillo, we both say these people twice, and she catches it both times. And that is a delineation, I think, between the have and have-nots and being in touch and out of touch. And I don't remember specifically. I think it ended up improv a bit.
Oh, okay. So I was going to ask you about that scene.
It's very like, I told you not to come here. These people have no idea. It was these people.
Right. So did you do a lot of improv? Because I know you mentioned kind of going over the script with Sandra Bullock and kind of mining things.
Yeah, Sandra's great at the read through, specifically with the cast. She catches things really quick, and Spanish is not my first language. I still am learning to, if this were an interview in Spanish, it would not be as delightful as it is now. So that was tricky for me. And at the read-through, they had kind of changed a lot of the Spanish. I'd worked on it really hard, and then they like, here's a new version. We're going in 10 minutes. I'm like, okay. So I probably butchered a bit of the Spanish. So, and the read-through is the scariest part, because it's like, you can get fired at this point.
Once it's on film, you think you're pretty good.
And even then, when enough of it's in the can, then maybe you're okay. But you kind of have. I'm the new guy. I'm not like know. So all that to say is, at the end of the script, she kind of did have a little bit of like, I don't know if American audiences are going to be able to sit through as much Spanish as is in here. So there's still a lot of Spanish in the film, but they ended up cutting a lot, and my character ended up being mostly in English.
Okay, good.
Did that answer the question?
No, I was just talking about the scene. So was there a lot of improv?
A lot of improv, yeah. So all that to say is, David does tend to film it script first. Okay. Exactly the words. Okay. And then he'll do a few takes improv. Okay. And he'll do that a lot of times. A lot of things might never end up in the film. He does that so that we can just kind of become present, get us out of our heads, out of performance mode, and into creative mode.
Do you like that?
I love that. Yeah. There are some moments in the film that he loved and I loved, and it seemed like everybody loved, and I think it almost made it in, but didn't. Okay. So it's tricky.
Maybe they'll be in the deleted scenes.
I hope so. I'd love some deleted scenes. But it's an interesting process with the improv.
So there's another bus scene where Castillo's bus is racing Rivera's bus, and imagine with movie magic, you were not in the bus at that time.
That was actually it was cool too, because that was actually the very last day of filming.
Oh, okay.
Was the bus scene, and yes, we were not. That was all a second unit filming some amazing stuff, but we were in green screen mode.
Okay. Yeah,
but that is where she dropped her drawers and kind of did the whole thing. I think we were probably going to get there, right? That is what. Now, I'm a gentleman. I don't. Well, it's not like it was visible anyway. Right. But yeah, so that was that. We were on the green screen for the last day. It was a long day, and for me, a little bit emotional because it'd been like a 2.5 month shoot, and that was the famous Sandra Bullock butt and bus scene.
So spoiler alert, was that her?
They're so funny how they are with this. At Toronto, she claimed it was Clooney's butt, and he said yes, and they shaved nicely.
So go see the movie, because you're going to see a nice butt.
You're going to see a very nice butt. Sandra Bullock, she rocks those glutes. She knows what she's doing.
She is in great shape.
And I'm a fan as much as I'm a peer and coworker with her. So I want to see what she eating. She is very healthful.
Yeah, even on set.
But not unknown to maybe have a little piece of processed turkey if that was all that was there. She's not crazy.
She goes all out.
She's just a regular person. I'm sorry if I said things out of turn here. So yeah.
Now we know
Sandra Bullock eats processed turkey once in a while.
Can you believe it? So the last line of the movie is literally the last line she says is, "If you don't like the path you're on, start paving another one," which I love, and which is so fitting for your bio. I read your bio and I was blown away. This is the most interesting man in the world. So let's get right to it. You were born and raised in Southern California.
I was.
Your father.
My father's Bolivian, which is where the movie takes place.
And your mom?
She was born in Pasadena.
Okay.
But her folks were English and Irish, and they came to Pasadena and they met here. Okay. My grandma on my mom's side was a maid, and my grandpa was a chauffeur for a very wealthy couple. And so the maid and the chauffeur met, got married, and lived at the rich family's home while they were married, and then gave birth to mommy. Nice. So that's mom's past. And my grandparents on my dad's side were from Bolivia, from Cochabamba, and they were actually like missionaries stationed in. They were born and raised in Bolivia, and they worked with the Salvation Army organization. Okay, very nice. So my dad was actually raised in an orphanage because they ran an orphanage. Okay. And it was interesting because they had like 5 kids. My is it 5? Forgive me, aunts and uncles. But they didn't necessarily want to treat their own kids better than the orphans. So my dad had this very strange kind of orphan feel to his life. He was kind of raised with the other orphans, so it was a little bit of a feral quality to his upbringing. And it was.
So he was a non-orphan orphan.
In a weird way. Like, obviously, they're his kid. It was interesting. Right. They tried to kind of create this environment where they were all their children, kind of thing.
Which is kind.
It was kind. But I think it got tricky. And then he came here at 18 and met my mom through the Salvation Army. The Salvation Army organization, everyone knows it as like, at Christmas time, they'll be ringing their bells. They do a lot of good work. They're always the first ones there at any tragedy or catastrophe. They're pretty much on the up and up. And my father came through them. And when you come to America, my mom was working, I think, at one of the Salvation Army where the homeless people can go to get food. And my dad just went there. And so they met there, and she taught him Spanish. So I'm getting way ahead of you.
No, I love family history. So he was a gardener here in America. He met your mother. What did your mother's family think of him?
My mom's, it was so funny, and it was almost like a reverse racism. I think my mom's family, my grandparents, were perfectly okay, even though this is 1958. And my dad did have to sit in the back of the bus. So he had this interesting, like, he felt like a black man his whole life, too. Like, I sat in the back of the bus. I don't really know the difference. Right. But they accepted him just fine, maybe because they were a maid and a chauffeur, and they weren't really, they were just people who took people as is. But my grandparents in South America, on my father's side, who I guess in a way are powerful. Religious people are powerful there. Church people, there's that it matters in some of these countries, especially in Latin America. They weren't too sure about this white woman.
They heard about her.
She had to kind of prove herself to them.
Interesting.
To a degree.
Interesting.
But they loved her.
And your father was a very talented musician. He was a famous trumpet player in Bolivia.
Wow, it's interesting. I'm telling stories. Like I've been telling some of these stories a few times, but this is a different take. I really appreciate what you're asking. My dad was a trumpet player, and my uncle was a guitar player. My uncle's like the biggest Elvis impersonator in Bolivia. But my uncle really should have been a rock star because he was that good at age 15 in the 50s, Elvis Presley, all that stuff. Again, my grandpa being a religious figure, none of this rock and roll shenanigans.
Right, moving your pelvis around.
No, exactly. So when I remember a story that he was on the radio in Bolivia playing live, I think, his guitar, like Elvis, and it was amazing. And I think my grandma and my aunt were listening, and Grandpa came home, heard it, and like that was like the end of it. He just lost his lid. And so my father played trumpet really because, again, the Salvation Army rings their bells and has people.
So trumpet's okay.
Because they play music, you know? Right. So they were raised doing that, and my uncle played his guitar, but the rock and roll part couldn't happen. So my uncle ended up never really being able to pursue that passion in a really supportive environment. So
did he tour with you? So you eventually, from the age of 17 to early 20s, toured with your dad, right?
It was so interesting because my father was diagnosed. So my father... Yeah, in the States, my father was a gardener. He had his own business, but at some point it was funny. He was the cliche, He was a Latin gardener, and my mom was a school teacher. But so he was diagnosed with leukemia and decided, this is ridiculous. I'm a musician. This is my passion. This is what I've always wanted to do. And so he lit a fire under himself and started putting out music like crazy and made an album. And I was doing this kind of Latin hip hop. think rap music in NWA had just come in, and I was ready. So
You were known as Kingpin, right?
I gave myself the moniker of Kingpin, the boy named Kingpin. Yeah. So we went and toured. We recorded the album in Costa Rica, actually, and then toured in Costa Rica and in South America, mostly Bolivia. And it's funny because it was my dad had like a gospel slant to his Latin trumpet playing. So
Right.
I had a gospel slant to my hip hop rap. And so we would go to churches. Basically, when I say touring, we're going to like churches or like opening up for like, big gospel concerts.
Yeah.
And we actually got to number 8 in the Bolivian pop
Nice.
charts.
So your dad, did he leave his gardening business and say, this is what I'm going to do?
He would go for, a few weeks at a time, come back, or a month.
But he made it work.
And he made it work. My brother had sort of taken over. It was really important for my dad to he didn't know how long he had. He ended up lasting 6 years. It was a while, but he wanted to kind of take care of.
Yeah.
So for me, he built a little music studio, saying, all right, my son will be doing music. My other son will take over my landscaping business, which was actually thriving pretty well. And, that was what was important. So he was able to leave that with my brother most of the time when he'd go touring.
Nice. And so you joined him, which must have been so much fun.
It was, my dad's not perfect. He's a fallible human being. And I was, especially at that point, I was older and I got to see sides of him that were very human, less of the father-son dynamic and more like two friends. And that's interesting, I like that.
Yes.
It was something maybe I had to process later because it's a shift. I don't know if you ever, when you see your parents in these more interesting situations, but those are my best memories of my dad.
Nice. There was a book in that, in this 17-year-old
maybe,
touring with his dad who decided to go
definitely.
forward in the music business. It's wonderful. So sadly, your dad passed when you were 21, right?
So I was 21 when he passed, right.
And the music really died at that point for you.
It was never really in me the way it was in my father.
Okay.
Creativity was, the arts were, performing was for sure. And then I had a girlfriend who, it had never occurred to me to do acting. I didn't do it at all in high school. When I was young, I always wanted to. TV and film, I didn't want to I thought of myself as a cool kid, so I didn't want to be one of those drama nerds. But in hindsight, it would have been interesting and probably would have saved me from some trouble if I had started in high school. But so I started doing that. I took a class in a community college, and pretty quickly I liked it. And I got good. I was able to. It seemed like it worked for me too.
Yeah.
Those community colleges, those teachers are always looking for good actors, and they were like, It was nice. You're like, I think they like me. I think they're like excited. This guy's pretty good. Yeah.
Right. Nice. So
you
graduated from there and then started booking jobs.
I did. I went to a couple of years of just doing plays and having fun.
Right.
And I'm really glad I did that. You work on stage, behind the scenes and everything, and you really get acting inside your blood. You have the right reasons that you're doing it. You realize that it's just something you love to do. And then I went to a professional acting school at South Coast Repertory, which is, I had been seeing shows there, and it's like the 5th most prestigious school, theater in the U.S., and I couldn't believe it was right in my hometown. And they offered a professional conservatory, so I went through that. And then, and it was cool because then they allowed me to do shows on their main stage and on their second stage.
So you were in the shows that you used to go see.
Yeah.
Which is very exciting.
Yeah.
So it wasn't always smooth sailing, though. You were booking jobs, but you had an ongoing struggle with addiction.
Addiction was always this what is it? The monster.
And you tried everything, right?
Yeah, it's interesting. The first time I ever smoked pot, I think I was 15. I was 15. And it was, I had bought this little bag with a friend of mine, and we both took a puff. He didn't like it and gave me the other half, and I continued to smoke for 4 more years. He's a valedictorian, and I ended up barely getting out of that high school. I think I even had to do a unit in summer school. I know I did.
Right.
And then at 19, I had kind of a spiritual awakening, I guess, for my life. That wasn't new for me. That's something I kind of had always experienced. I was raised in a religious environment, and it was always real for me. So I always felt this connection to God. And then at 19, I got clean. But then, it after Dad died, and then it just comes back.
Yeah.
It came back a couple of different times.
And did it come back in hardcore drugs?
Yeah, once
Because
I got
you are able to drink socially now.
Yeah, I'm able to drink socially now. Now I have such a different handle on it. I think we're going to get to probably talking about some of the healing that came from that. But I did everything in 15, 16, 17, 18, everything. So it was the 80s too. I think
the
things
go-go 80s.
that people did in the 80s that they were capable of doing. Yeah. So and then at 27 is when it came back.
Yeah.
And that was tricky.
And how did it manifest? Were you booking jobs but not able to show up?
No, I had booked really quick in LA. I had got this film, my first film, was with this director, Miguel Arteta. The movie was called Starmaps. It was my first audition. He called me back for like the lead part, and I got a different part. There was no pay for it, so I didn't understand movies or filming back then. I didn't understand anything. All I knew is I was filming for 3 days, but I had to miss one day because I had this like Carl's Jr. training video for this industrial. Right? Oh, it paid like $800, for like some training video for Carl's Jr. employees. But it cut me from the movie. Yeah. I didn't get it, and that was just a real heartbreak. And then, but at the same time, things were coming really quickly. I started dating this kind of rock star. I was a punk rock kid. Yeah. And I had a poster over on my wall when I was 12, I remember. And then I go to LA 10 years later, and I meet this woman who was in this band called X, which was like a seminal punk band. Her name's Exene Cervenka. And for some strange reason, we start dating. I'm like 25 years old, and she's 40. And,
did you tell her that you had her poster?
I did. Yeah, I did. Still to this day, don't know what she saw. But because any fan talk was like annoying to her. But really, no, she was just very spiritual. She was a very grounded person. She was very beneficial. I really cared a lot for her. But again, she was 40, I was 25. She wanted to get married and maybe have a kid. And she already had a kid. Her ex-husband was Viggo Mortensen, and they had a child. And he was really involved in her life. So I was around all these kind of A-list environment, and it was overwhelmed me. And I really, honestly, I had a breakdown. Yeah. I couldn't do it. And I just completely pulled myself away, burned every bridge I could possibly have. And that was such a heartbreak. It took years to get over that. Yeah. And it put me right back into addiction. Okay. I started waiting tables, and I'm in LA now, not in Orange County, in this safe little beach environment of Dana Point. Now I'm in the big city. Yeah. And it took me down pretty quick, and I got addicted to cocaine, and I was managing my career, but...
So when did you decide to go to Brazil?
So then for the next 7 years... you call yourself an actor, but really you're just waiting tables and...
So it was 7 years in that phase of struggling?
7 years of like an addiction, but kind of... It was addiction also mixed with therapy and antidepressants. Okay. So like I would try to clean up and I get on... Wow, this is getting really...
Did you try rehab?
Heavy. That was the last resort. Okay. I actually did I had another girlfriend, and I'd lost a couple of relationships from it, and I finally went to a rehab. That didn't work.
Which it doesn't work for a lot of, it's not one size fits
not
all.
necessarily.
So you have to find what works for you. And what ended up working for you is
I love 12-step. I love all that. But in my blood is this indigenous plant medicine called ayahuasca. It comes from the Amazon, from Peru, from Bolivia, and Brazil. And it's kind of touted as 10 years of therapy in one night. It has the possibility to really shift things in your life if you're open and if it's something you're ready for. Right. I had read about people going down there for addiction. People were coming back from heroin addiction and cocaine addictions, and they were different and changed, and it was working at a much higher success rate than 12-step even was. So my father had always mentioned a plant that he wanted me to do as a rite of passage into manhood. And I had never done it. And he never really named that plant. But it was obvious that it was ayahuasca. Again, growing up religious, it's not something that he specifically probably was comfortable talking about.
Okay.
But it's such a powerful tool.
He knew about it and knew that it helped other people.
And so I found it through, I think, a series of synchronicities.
Okay. Was the Brazil trip specifically? Was it
was
designed
Brazil.
to?
Yeah,
get this?
I had a commercial, I think, that brought me a nice chunk of change, and I said I'm going to book a tour through one of these Western eco tours, real safe, like Americans come to Brazil and we'll put you up in these really nice, I mean, it's indigenous, but they're really nice. Right. So it had a lot of amenities, but it was still, you're still going an hour up the Amazon in a little boat. And, but yeah, I was in Bahia in Brazil and spent 10 days and working with this plant medicine ayahuasca. I had just met my wife. We were just dating, and I had told her I was going to go do this trip, and that was a turning point for me.
Did you tell her why?
Well, at that point, it was for a lot of reasons. The addiction was, I had kind of, it wasn't completely out of control.
Okay.
I had gotten to a manageable place in my life. I think that's why I was able to meet her. Okay. And it wasn't problematic, but, again, I knew it wasn't gone. I never know when it's going to come back. And so I really wanted to just go. Yeah. So it wasn't necessarily, I wasn't going there in any kind of like withdrawal or addiction mode, but it was definitely, that was why I went.
So what does the plant, how do you take it, and what does it
So the plant, ayahuasca is actually a tea. Okay. It's interesting because it's a plant and a vine. Right. So it's not just one substance, like one, it's not like a flower. It's not like cannabis is this flower you find, I'll smoke it, and they figured it out. What's interesting is there's thousands of plants in the Amazon, and somehow they found out this plant and this vine, when put together and combined and extracted and everything else, creates this mother plant. Okay. It's got a very female spirit to it, almost. It's almost a feminine energy. And don't quote me on the facts of this, but at some point it was interesting. I know in the history of ayahuasca, when the scientists mixed with the indigenous people and discovered this medicine, they were describing the DNA molecule to the Indians, and they're like, well, that's basically the ayahuasca vine and plant, because they intertwine in that kind of DNA. Okay. So there's these ideas that that this is kind of almost a source of origin of life. Like the divine might have actually sparked through these plants.
So when you drink the tea, do you feel a calming, or how does it like?
You drink the tea. It's a taste I love now. Yeah. But yeah, no, it's very bitter and foreign. It doesn't necessarily come on in a way that's predictable. I went with a group of, I went on my own, but there was a group of probably 15 to 20 of us. I didn't know any of them. And it didn't work for everybody. Okay.
And they were all looking for the same?
Yeah, they were all looking for... No.
Oh, okay.
No, I think there might have been one or two of us for addiction. People go just to get better. Okay. A lot of them have been in therapy for a long time. There's a lot of lawyers or professionals, some hippie people, sure. But when you get to the point of ayahuasca, normally you're actually at a pretty serious place, because everyone pretty much figured out this isn't a party drug. It's a very difficult evening, actually, in some ways, because you're faced with yourself in its most bare bones way. So it's a very exposing evening, but it's also very loving and kind and compassionate. So it gets cathartic. So
there's hallucinations?
There can be.
And do they separate you, or so that no one?
With ayahuasca, I work with different plant medicines. Some we could engage, you and I. We could even be on the medicine and talking like this. Okay. Maybe not like this, but we can communicate. Ayahuasca on its own, you're basically laying down on a mat, and it's just you and the universe. You're not really interacting with anyone. Even getting to the restroom becomes its own like crawling process. So, yes, you can see things. You know, I tend to see prehistoric things usually. But mostly there's just these ideas of what your life's been like. It kind of just shows you your life without judgment. Yes. And you're able to see yourself, warts and all, and still have compassion for yourself, but also see what might benefit you to change.
Right, yeah.
And there's a little window afterwards. You know, if you don't do anything after you do ayahuasca and you just whatever, you're the same old a-hole in 2 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
But
Right.
there is a window
Yes.
after you do it where it really does become it's easy. It's not easy, but you can change.
Yeah.
You can get a head start and
amazing.
start things. So have
It
you ever
sounds like,
worked with it?
No, but I believe that that's what happens after you die. You review your life, and it's non-judgmental, and
Yeah.
this is your journey, and this is what you learned. But to be able to do that while you're still alive and fix the journey going forward,
it's incredible.
It's an extraordinary experience. And addiction, you know, so my father has diabetes,
Okay.
and it's a real disease, and but it doesn't change his personality. With addiction, it's a real disease, but it affects people's personalities.
It does.
And that's the hard part, I think, for people to understand, is that to heal is to, you know, my father doesn't have to go to a psychiatrist for diabetes, but
No.
it's helpful.
And it's funny
for
too
someone with
because in
addiction.
12-step they always describe addiction as a disease similar to diabetes. I mean, I don't think they would be that oversimplified, but
Right.
and it's interesting because they always describe in 12-step, because I tried that for a number of years, is that addiction is a spiritual malady.
Mm-hmm.
That's part of one of their in the book, the big book. I think. Forgive me, 12-steppers, if I'm misquoting, but the spiritual malady part stuck with me because that was from I had existential angst since I was 5 years old. Again, Salvation Army is a religious organization, but they're kind of like they can be very black and white.
Okay.
So the idea of hell and you're an evil person and you got to accept Jesus, or Satan is you're gonna burn forever in hell. That was just the truth back then, and it never sat right with me, and it would terrify me. So, and the idea of eternity terrified me at awkwardly young ages, like 5 and 7, and I'm like, I don't think my parents were prepared for like
some of these questions you're probably asking.
No. So with ayahuasca, it feels like it is a cure. For the existential angst, and it's a grounding place for you to anchor into. I'm alive. I'm living. I'm not dying anytime soon, hopefully. But yeah, I can experience a little bit of what the whole nature of it with ayahuasca.
Do you have you done it again since then?
Yeah, you know, I ended up coming back to LA and working. You know, I think the layman's term would say a shaman. Whenever you do these ceremonies, you do them. They are, you know, you do them in a group. You'll do them with a shaman, someone who has worked with these, who has a lineage, and they play music the whole time. It's called the Icarus. It kind of covers the space. Whenever things might get troublesome in the evening, you tune into the music, and it kind of it'll anchor you so that you're good. And then they'll spend time over you. You might have your eyes closed and you'll feel someone blowing some kind of like essential oil or some kind of smoke from something. They're doing all kinds of mojo there, and it works really well. So I came back to LA and I found a teacher he's got like 3 PhDs and he's been doing this for 40 years. So to call him a shaman, he's not like he doesn't have a little leaf skirt or in a thing. He's a businessman. But I've seen him. I've worked with him for the last 7 years, and my wife started working with him too.
Oh, nice.
And we do ceremonies a few times a year to kind of, it's very important.
And you haven't had a desire to find cocaine or?
Well, you know, it's not. You know, that's what changed. I don't know. There's a nature to addiction that I find. I think any addict would say it never goes away.
Okay.
The desire to use it goes away, but the trap of like anything, it's still there.
Yeah.
I'm a happily married man with a beautiful wife, but you know I'm a man, so like it's like that. Am I never gonna have an attraction to a woman that I see that's beautiful to me?
Right. You're still human.
Or am I gonna act on it? No.
Right.
So it's very similar.
That's a good analogy.
It's the first time I've said that one, but
No,
it is very
analogy.
similar. If everyone's sitting here doing drugs right here, I'd be like, I should leave or I'm gonna.
Right.
So yeah.
Right. That's a great analogy.
Right.
So so in the irony of all of the things in Dominic Flores' life, this is so wonderful. So you, during your time with battling addiction, you found yourself at Rampart, the prison.
So I had managed to clean up my addiction to the point where I could start my acting career again. I have an agent, Robert Depp, at the Beverly Hecht Agency. He's still my agent. He was a friend. He was no stranger to the addiction fight in the past, but he'd gotten his life together. And he was actually a theatrical agent for film and television. And he told me, because I had had success, and he always was aware of that. And he said, listen, if you ever want to come back to acting, I'm an agent now. Yeah. So that was enough impetus for me to try and, I think it took a couple of years, but he was getting me auditions, and I was able to go out, and I finally got a little job on My Name is Earl.
I love that show.
I love that show too. And and I got 2 lines on that, and it shifted everything for me. And the addiction slowly but surely went away just from, from finding success and being on set and realizing that this is amazing. And addiction for me also is like a shadow side. It's like the bad boy part of me. Okay. And I think it's important. I think every human has this shadow side, and it kind of has us act out and doing things, whether it's addiction. I know you got your little things there, Fern.
Right,
we don't need to get into it. I don't know what your thing is. Maybe it's Oreo cookies at midnight.
No, I was screaming at the Express Scripts lady, my pharmacist this morning. I'm like, I'm a better person than this, but I'm screaming at this lady. So I have my thing. Yeah.
So acting became one way for my shadow side to work for me. So now I could play a bad guy, and I could do all these diabolical things, and I could, but instead of like these horrible things taking away from my life and depleting my family of their emotions, it's actually putting food on my table. Yes. And that's, I think, the goal is to integrate the shadow side so that it works for you.
Yes.
So Rampart, So that's getting into that. So Rampart, man, my answers are all so circuitous.
No, they're great.
I had a huge crack cocaine addiction. And this was after my relationship with the rock star. And it didn't go away at all. And I got arrested in the Rampart district of LA. And there was a big police scandal going on because, unfortunately, there was a faction of the Rampart police that were corrupt, and they were no better than these so-called criminals that they were busting, and they were taking the drugs, reselling them, or they were... The Rampart scandal's amazing. And so, I got arrested for possession, and I was in this Rampart. I'm crying, like a 30-year-old man crying. How old was I? 29, 28, something, whatever it was. Far too old to be in this nonsense. And again, I've always, knock on wood, I've always felt this divine kind of character. I don't know, my life is my life. And I went in front of the judge a week later or 2 weeks later, whenever it was, and he dismissed the entire case because it was an illegal search and seizure, and it was in the middle. It was at the height of the Rampart scandal, and he looked at me and just didn't see the threat, and and they did trick me. I mean, granted, look, I did have the stuff, but they did trick me. They lied. They're like, and they did illegally search. All of that was true.
Right. Did you have a lawyer who said they illegal, or
I had a public defender? Okay, that's what I'm saying. I didn't know anything. I didn't realize what was in front of me, but I got case dismissed, out of there, fine. Did it stop my addiction? No. Okay. That's the sad part.
Yeah. But then it did eventually stop, and you started working.
So that was the arrest. And then 5 years later, I got cast in the movie about the scandal.
Crazy.
Woody Harrelson was starring as a corrupt cop, and I was playing a detective, a Latin detective. And I get in this movie, and it's just one scene. And they're having me. It's Woody Harrelson, but it's not like a big studio production. So we're changing in our wardrobe in the Rampart police station, which had been shut down. It was like a ghost station. They reopened it just for the filming of this movie. And I'm sitting on the exact same bench that I was handcuffed to. They have these little handcuffs on the benches.
Is that crazy?
It was the best. I'm looking around to tell somebody. I'm like, I can't tell anybody because this is insane. But. Yeah.
It's like when you were arrested and chained there was an angel being like, you're going to get over this. In fact, you're going to be starring in a movie where you're going to be sitting right here.
I often wonder if a lot of humans, if they would just pay attention, would see these synchronicities. I believe they would.
Yes,
but
I think so too.
I look for them daily now,
yes.
and it's no coincidence when I find them. This is the fabric and blueprint of how we live, and yeah, so I'll remember that.
Amazing irony.
Yeah.
What a blessing.
Yeah.
So when you mentioned meeting your beautiful wife, Kristen Ridgway Flores,
she's
and
so pretty.
When you met her at the beginning, you're like, I'm going to Brazil, and she was like, my uncle's the Green River Killer.
We hadn't dated more than a few weeks. I went to
what year was that?
This was 2007, honey? I
Okay.
think 2007.
Because in 2001, they had identified him, so she had known already.
They had he had done most of his name was Gary Ridgway. He was the Green River Killer. He killed 100 prostitutes in Seattle over the course of 20 years. Most of the women were killed between 1980 and 1982. It was insane how often it was happening, and the whole city was like hostage, and no one was going outdoors. Granted, he was only killing prostitutes, but it was just not a good situation. He ended up
finding bodies, right?
Yeah. He never stopped completely, but he found a woman and married her, and somehow
he was married 3 times, right?
Yeah, and this third wife actually calmed him down and like arrested this killing spree. But again, like any addict, he wasn't gone. Right. So he still was relapsing. And in 2001, they finally caught him. They had actually arrested him at one point because he was a suspect. But they took a DNA swab, and he passed a lie detector test. So that was enough for my in-laws to be like, look, it's not him. So in 2001, when they arrested him, because they had now DNA evidence that was the technology had caught up. DNA was brand new, though. My mother-in-law, my wife's mom, was a paralegal for a big law firm. So she knew the law. She knew lawyers. She got a high-powered lawyer to defend him because she's like, this DNA is so rough and so new. There's just no way. It's an election year. This is just...
And
the politicians
there was no way it could be him.
He passed a lie detector test, and he's such a... There's no way. He's just so... He's unassuming. That's the perfect word. So they defended him for 2 full years, and then he finally confessed in 2003 when my father-in-law finally saw the evidence coming in, and so his brother is my wife's father. And thanks to him, he got Gary to confess, and he actually led the police to like 11 more bodies, 7 or 11 more bodies. And so that was something good that came from it. And because of that, he didn't get the death penalty, so he got like 40 consecutive life sentences. But my wife was just shattered from that. She was in school in LA at that point. She wasn't in Seattle, but she just cut it off. In her brain, she wasn't affected. When she told me about this, it was a really... Listen, I need to tell you something about my life. And I was prepared for I'd heard a lot of people's lives, so I was prepared for something that I could handle. And but when she said that, I could handle it. It was just didn't see that coming. But she said it kind of in that nonchalant way also, where it didn't. I'm like, oh my, wow, what are you? She's like, I'm fine. No, I'm good. It's not me. It's my uncle. I'm not close to him. Like it was very It was And so that was kind of like, okay.
Yeah, there's more there. So so you and Kristen made a documentary.
We made a documentary. River Killer. My uncle's the Green River Killer. They just kind of we didn't pick the title. They just kind of slapped that one right on there. We did it for LMN Lifetime Network. Documentaries changed my life many times. I'm a documentary guy. I also love it. This Our Brand is Crisis is based on a documentary. I love documentaries. I think they can really shift people. So I told her I thought it might be a good idea to do a story, not about him, not about her uncle, but about the family members of these people, because they're all out there and no one tends to talk. I think Oprah might have had one person on one time, but it's just not something that these people do. And when I saw firsthand what it was doing to them, and again, not in a way where they're not functional. They're fine. It just reminded me of myself. I'm fine. But really, I'm like, there's a wound, and I see it, and it hasn't been easy with my in-laws. I was very presumptuous, and I didn't actually come at it from a way that, like in hindsight, I can see why there was so much.
Did you say anything that
tricky.
Offended them?
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure.
Oh, really?
Well, coming from a loving place, but also maybe just not respectful of what the life they'd been through. So yeah, I'll own that. Yeah. Again, not from any malicious or dismissive place, but just me thinking I know what they need to heal.
Right.
That's that's my thing.
So the documentary was very healing.
It was very healing. So my wife ended up doing ayahuasca journeys, and my teacher, after about a couple of years, she had integrated this enough for her to be able to talk about it.
Yeah.
And again, the timing was there.
Yeah.
And we could even keep going. I don't know, it was weird because I took 3 months off to produce this with my wife, so I wasn't acting. And she was like, you're going to be blessed for something good's going to happen from this. I know it. And I'm like, honey, are you kidding me? Like, I love acting. I love doing my couple of lines on these TV shows, but it's also like, I feel producing this project feels amazing.
Yes,
The fact that we're doing this and it's happening. I don't need anything. This is great. I feel empowered. I feel like I'm offering and I'm contributing to the world with this.
Because we always hear about these tragedy, shootings, and I always think
more and more,
it's a shame. It's awful. And I think, of course you feel for the victims' families. But then there's the shooters' family who could be perfectly wonderful people.
And who aren't
there's
really allowed to have feelings because they're not technically victims.
Right.
So this documentary, it was a big part of it. We talked to the victims' family members.
Right.
It wasn't.
Was it? So in producing it, was it almost impossible to get them to speak?
Yeah, but like any other, and the motives are always,
questions.
What are they doing?
Yes,
They're trying to capitalize off this guy. But of course, there are other family members who are trying to find some kind of healing. So they were actively out there, and we were able to find the ones that were also looking to talk to Gary. He's still alive. There was a woman from the documentary who wanted to talk to him and just get the scoop. What happened to my sister? Why'd you do it?
Right.
And my job was talking to him on the phone to kind of like make sure that he was still open to doing this and stuff. So,
what was your initial impression of him?
Nice guy.
Yeah, isn't that crazy?
That's what's crazy.
Yeah.
That's and I do feel like I am the kind of person, if we hung out for another few hours, I feel like I would get your whole life story and you'd trust me with it because I do care. So talking to him was not a privilege, that's not the word, but I did feel like I was placed in I'm glad that I got to do this part. I do feel like, wow, I'm glad I could carry that space. I'm glad I was, I don't know. I don't know if that sounds right. But, so I took it really seriously.
I understand.
And then my father-in-law couldn't really... It was tricky for him. We all came into this like, we're ready to do this. He agreed, but it's not like anything's easy with these kind of projects. And at one point he had to pull away and say, I can't really do this. And so then my job was to just kind of take care of him while they were still filming. And they're like, try to get him back here. And I'm like, okay, but in the meantime, we're just going to watch Redbox DVDs. And it was the World Cup that year. And we're going to watch the World Cup. And we're not going to talk about Green River or this project or his brother or anything.
Yeah.
And after a couple of days, we rented this movie called Joe, which David Gordon Green directed. And it stars Nicolas Cage. And it's
the director of Our Brand is Crisis?
The director of Our Brand is Crisis, David Gordon Green. I was a big fan. He does movies like Pineapple Express, these broad comedies. Yeah. But he also does these really small independent dramas. One's called Joe. And Nicolas Cage plays this real down and dirty kind of southern... it's just a fan. It just gets really into like the past of a family, and the darkness that comes in that family. And my father-in-law, after seeing it, said, that's a really good movie. Like it reminded me of my childhood in a weird way. Something to that effect. Something to where I'm like, there are people who understand the story of what happened, and who could. That's what I'm trying to say. They won't exploit. They could really tell a story here. And this is one of these guys. His name's David Gordon Green. He's amazing. And I called my agent friend, Rob, and I said, man, we just saw Joe, and I think my father-in-law might want to go back to the film. I don't know. I don't know that he would. And he's like, well, that's David Gordon Green. Yeah, he did. He's great at Pineapple Express. Wouldn't it be great to get in for him one day?
Amazing.
And it really was. So my father-in-law went back and finished the special. And a month later, I think it was really a month later, I got this audition. So
you have David Gordon Green to thank for a few things.
I love David Gordon Green. I saw him at the premiere the other night, and I haven't seen him for a year. And you don't really talk too much. I saw him at Toronto, but they're A-listers. I'm starring in the movie with them, but at the same time, they're
right.
Hi, how you doing? Good to see you. But you're not like really
getting into it. Okay.
It's not like Sandra's kids and I were hanging out and trick or treating together in New Orleans on Halloween last year. But they're more than kind, and So I told my mom. I said, David, this is my mom, and he said, oh wow, your son's really great. You have a very weird and wild son. So I love that. That's my relationship to David.
What a wonderful compliment.
That made me very, very happy. So
from weird and wild to feeling good, you and your wife Kristen you created the Feel Good Film Festival.
Yeah,
which ran from 2008 to 2012.
Yeah, it was right when I met my wife. She was working on that. And she's like, we can date, sure, but this is my passion. Yeah. This is my boyfriend. This is what I'm doing. So jump in with it, or I don't know if I have time for you. And I did. We jumped into this feel-good film festival, which is contrary to any kind of films I like. I like serious documentaries and gritty indie movies. And these were just movies that the mission statement was you're going to feel better when you get up than from when you sat down.
I love those, but I wasn't here from 2008 to 2012, so you have to bring it back.
It was really great. We did it at the Egyptian Theater. We had some amazing guest hosts, Rainn Wilson from The Office and Cheryl Hines from Curb Your Enthusiasm. And so many amazing films that we screened. But it was just such a grassroots, like, it wasn't cool. It was just fun, and everyone there had a great time. And I would love to bring that back.
Wasn't the red carpet like sunflowers? It was very bright.
Yeah, it was yellow.
Yeah.
It was sunflowers were the mascot. She had this Raisin Bran sunflower with a smiley face. I'm like, it was so girl-centric, too, which is amazing. One thing ayahuasca teaches you is the power of the woman. So I understand the power. You guys are the goddesses.
I'm all about the sunflowers.
We lift the heavy objects. You guys get us to the top. We turn around and give it all back to you. And so I understand the power. And you're the goddess. I get it.
Thank you.
2012 was not the end of the world. It was the beginning of the feminine spirit and the end of this male-dominated crap. So it's about you guys right now. I'm with you.
So
this was 6 girls in charge of this feel-good film festival, and I just lifted totems and stuff. I didn't do much more than that. So,
well, it's my dream that it comes back. So, like your wife, I will dream on it. I'll sleep on it.
I'm not going to say
no
to that.
I would love that. I would absolutely
awesome.
love that.
Yeah.
So, did your wife have a dream that you will be starring in a movie with Susan Sarandon by any chance?
It's so funny.
Because you're in The Meddler, which is coming out. Is it next year?
That one, world premiered at Toronto. Such a great project. I have that one and another film. It's really interesting. After you do this big movie, I stopped doing small parts. I want to kind of run with this as much as I could. But it's not like your career changes once you film it. Everyone in the industry is very happy for you, but it's not like anything really changes until the movie comes out. So opportunities weren't necessarily wasn't
flooding in.
That's the way to put it. And I did audition. I had a number of auditions this year, and there were some that I'm really glad I didn't get.
Yeah.
They might have been very lucrative, but I don't know. I mean, I didn't want to do that at this point with what I have on the table. So what I did get was The Meddler with Susan Sarandon, and then another one called First Girl I Loved. And lo and behold, it looks amazing. It looks like very conscious choices from my from my reps. This is an amazing film. It's Lorraine Scafaglia's the director. She did Seeking a Friend at the End of the World. It was a film she did with Steve Carell and Keira Knightley. Anonymous Content produced it. Joy Gorman-Weddles. She's a phenomenal woman. I'd love to keep working with their company. Yeah, and it's Susan Sarandon, J.K. Simmons, Rose Byrne, and
great cast.
Many handfuls, cameos of amazing, talented people, and I get to be one of them. So I just have one scene, but so many of the other cameos are just one scene that it looks very planned.
Right.
So The Meddler is
Dominic
exciting. Yeah, it's a mother-daughter movie. It's pretty great. It's a daughter whose mom is just meddles.
Yes.
Yeah.
Sounds like the perfect title. Well, congratulations on all of your success.
Yeah.
And your life could be a movie, and I can't wait for it to come out, but not for many years.
I truly
there's
appreciate.
There's more stories happening. I feel it.
I'm
More
a
good
talker,
things.
so I can
more
talk
good
forever.
things for you. Thank you so much. This was awesome.
Let's have me back in a year and see where it's at.
Absolutely.
Huh? Okay. All right.
Promise, please. Don't
Thanks,
forget
friend.
about your friends at Popcorn Talk. So where can we find you on social media?
Oh yeah, please follow me on Twitter at Dominic Flores 40. And Instagram at Dominic Flores 40 and Facebook Dominic Flores. I think that's all
Dominic
our
Flores,
handles.
actor, I think.
Dominic Flores, actor.
Yes.
Yeah.
Nice.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. And I'm Fern Ronay. You can find me on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at Fern Ronay. And thank you for joining us.
See the movie.
Yes, go see Our Brand is Crisis.
From producers Maria Menounos, Kevin Undergaro, Phil Svitek, and the entire Popcorn Talk Network, we would like to thank you for tuning in. For questions or comments, be sure to visit popcorntalk.com. I'm Sir Richard Wentworth, and this has been a presentation of the Popcorn Talk Network.
The views expressed herein are those of the hosts only and do not necessarily reflect the views of the Popcorn Talk Network or its owners or principals.